So not spend $1 on marketing and not push the product on anybody. So we weren't like, please wear these socks so we can spread it. And so it was like, let's put this out into the world. Let's be really focused about it. Let's serve the community first and foremost. And that was really like our go-to-market strategy was, how do we serve the community in unique ways that will create emotional connections with people in the New York City running community?
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Nick West, co-founder and CEO of Bandit. In this episode, we discuss the upstart apparel brand's mission to evolve running. Nick shares how he and his brother Tim built the company's cult following by prioritizing performance, community, and authenticity. We also cover Bandit's ambition to create a timeless brand with global reach. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM provides fitness and health facilities with smart workout solutions built on its ecosystem of hardware, software, and partners. But it's more than cool tech. Their connected training experience delivers business results while helping members reach their wellness goals. If you run a gym, health club, YMCA, or any kind of fitness facility, you should check them out. Visit egym.com to learn more. Hey, Nick, welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Psyched.
Yeah, man, me too. I think selfishly and personally very interested in the space, the brand, what you're building, how you've gone about it. But for folks who aren't familiar, maybe haven't seen Bandit, can you just tell us about yourself and the company, kind of where things are today, and then we'll get into it from there.
Yeah, I'll start with myself, which can't talk about myself without talking about my brother as well, because we're co-founders here. He truly started the brand out of his basement apartment in Williamsburg during the pandemic. And we grew up as lemonade stand kids together. We worked at an ecommerce company called jet.com for a couple of years together as well. And I've always had side projects. If we were at the same company or not, him and I have always been working on a project. Either he's leading it and I'm advising, or vice versa. And this one was the one that he kicked off. And so the through line of my career, I've mainly been either a super earlier employee or a co-founder or founder, mainly in the e-com and consumer brand space. So I was at Jet. Right after Jet, I actually helped launch a baby food company as the founding COO. Ton of learnings in that experience that I took over to Bandit once it evolved from where it was in the first year to where it is now. And the first year, it was really like a passion project. And a lot of people ask me like, what was the strategy behind Bandit, and what did you see as the white space? And it was very much not like a business school case study. It was more an organic feeling in general. My brother and I kind of grew up in the skate and surf scene in New Jersey, and we always really admired those brands that were born out of communities. And during the pandemic, he got super deeply integrated into New York City run culture, which is incredible. Just a massive patchwork of clubs, crews, and collectives that are, connected to other clubs and run scenes around the world. And the initial insight was just, this is an incredible, healthy, diverse ecosystem of people looking to add something that's really healthy to their lives. And we'd love to merge that passion. I mean, we both grew up running. My dad was an Ironman triathlete. My brother and I both played sports, me through high school. My brother was a D1 athlete. So running was like the consistent cross training for us. And then we've both ran post-college, not super competitively, but very consistently. And I think it's always great when you can put your head against something that merges your skill sets and your prior experiences with something that you're super, super passionate about. And so it was like, this space is incredible. How can we do something to partner with the community to bring something new to the market? And we started off with run socks. We launched our first like super limited edition batch of the Bandit performance running socks in October of 2020. And in the first year, really like, again, my brother like packing everything in his apartment, writing hand letter notes, super scrappy, self-funded for the full first year of the brand, and told himself really two things. One is not going to spend a dollar on marketing. We want it to grow really, really grassroots and have people fall in love with the brand that can then spread the word. So not spend a dollar on marketing and not push the product on anybody. So we weren't like, please wear these socks so we can spread it. And so it was like, let's put this out into the world. Let's be really focused about it. Let's serve the community first and foremost. And that was really like, that was our go-to-market strategy, was how do we serve the community in unique ways that will create emotional connections with people in the New York City running community. And if after that first year we both felt really good about it, we had a much bigger vision in the back of our heads the whole time, that we would quit our jobs and do it full time. And that's luckily, very luckily, what ended up happening.
Yeah, that's the dream, right? To combine working with your brother, and folks that listen to this show and know Fitt Insider know my brother and I started this company. We've worked together for 15 years in the health and fitness space. So as you're talking about it, there's like a lot of similarities that in that story, but also in just the complementary aspects. It sounds like what you bring to the table, what your brother brings to the table, obviously the built-in trust and then passion and then energy that comes with the community, all of those things kind of lining up in a way to be able to quit your jobs and do this full time. And now thinking about, yeah, the just what that means. I've seen it Bandit described as like the world's most authentic, community driven running brand. Obviously, the apparel, performance, community, a lot of these words get thrown around, but how do you just think about it in your head when you think like, this is what we're building, this is what we want to build it into? And you mentioned like having much bigger plans. Like, how do you do that beyond like the buzzwords that will typically just come top of mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. It definitely it attaches to, so we quit our jobs, we raised a seed round, and we both put really all of the key, what we thought were relevant learnings on paper, given our most recent experiences in the consumer and the e-com world. When I was at the baby food company, I lived through the iOS privacy changes, saw how insanely fickle paid performance marketing could be, and really, really admired brands that were able to build real brand equity, a brand that people have an emotional connection to. Um, and so the question really attaches to the mission and the vision, which is, we are a performance and lifestyle running apparel company, but the mission is to evolve running. And so what that means to us is, we've always thought not just about the product experience, but really all of the key touch points in a runner's journey, as to how we can elevate those touch points, serve the community in a new, refreshing way. The output of that hopefully is a lot of products being sold, but all of the decisions that we make internally, be it thinking about how we show up at a major marathon pop-up, or what the street race that we produce in Greenpoint, how that can be unique. It's always what's been done well in the past, where is there room for disruption and innovation, because that's really, it's not a competitive space. Apparel in general, activewear even more specifically, running apparel, a lot of brands. And so being really maniacal about doing things that serve people really well, but also make some noise and stand out in a new and refreshing way, is, we've always thought having that kind of forward-looking vision where the whole team is singularly motivated to bring something new to the market would allow us to gain momentum and create real emotional connections to the brand. And then you talked about the community obsessed piece. The mission's evolve running. The vision is be the most community centered brand in the world. And community is a term that, it's thrown out a lot in general, but it's been thrown out a lot in the past couple of years in the consumer brand world. And what that really means is, for us, it's like very tangible. It's bringing people together and creating really great experiences for them. And that shows up, very tactically in the way that we spend marketing dollars. I would say, relative to like the D2C 1.0 world where the majority of dollars were going towards paid Facebook, Instagram, creating an incredible funnel, juicing the conversion metrics. Ours has been really about how many people's experience can we touch in person, which we think has a more powerful halo effect. If you create a really great marathon experience after somebody's just trained for a 16-week training block and they come and they have a really unique metal portrait experience for us, that's worth 50 customers that you get through an Instagram ad. And if that was the first way that they found you. So the mission and vision are really very concrete to us, and the word community is really concrete to us, and it's really what guides. It's like the North Star internally. Every time we sit down for a meeting against something that we're going to be betting on, be it a pop-up, be it a new product, it's is this going to serve the community better, and then can we spread the word in a way that we're doing it in person with the running community.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, especially in not only the running community, but health and fitness more broadly. Everybody kind of thinking about how do we bring people together? What does community mean? And seemingly the number of companies that can be built kind of upon this space, even if you look at something like Strava, right? That's building community, connecting people. There's more digitally, but still bringing people together in real life, or CrossFit. Then you have, Rogue layered on top of that, and RX Bar built out of that community. When you look at running, it seems like now, and you mentioned this community, everybody has like this community strategy or playbook, and whether or not they're able to execute it and what that actually means for like significance and conversion and revenue, but also like how people interact with the brand. Have you guys articulated like the misconceptions maybe between like, oh, there's this community, I participate in this run group or fitness class or whatever it is, and this is how you bridge that to actually creating a brand and a product that is like a sustainable business and just not this idea I think that so many people have like, oh, I'm passionate about this thing and I could see a way to engage with these people. I'm going to try to start a business, build something on top of this versus like actually having something like Bandit where it's like, no, we can grow this into a legitimate company and it's everything, all the pieces put together beyond this idea, quote unquote, community.
In order to really execute on a community first strategy, it comes down to the people in the company or at the brand. Our first hire was our head of community outside of our other co-founder, who's our chief designer, who designs all of our apparel. But our first hire was our head of community. His name is Steve Finley. He founded Brooklyn Track Club, which is probably the biggest run club in New York City. Former pro runner for Nike. He launched Project Moonshot and the marathon training program at Nike. Spent a couple years at Tracksmith. Our head of experiential marketing, his name is Tim Rossi. He was doing brand marketing in Nike Chicago. Lifelong runner. He's got his own kind of collective of runners called the Lost Boys. And they really deeply understand. You can, at a surface level, look at running as a sport and as a culture and say, all right, these clubs exist. How do we tap into that? But there are a lot of nuances as to how you navigate that world and that ecosystem, and doing it right and doing it with the right people at the right time. And so those folks have been really instrumental in coming up with the much more granular strategy as to who we connect with, how we connect with them, and on what level, who we shouldn't be partnering with given where we're at or what we stand for as a brand. And so, yeah, you can come up with a community strategy, but you definitely need the people who understand the ecosystem and know how to do it in an authentic way. Because if you're not a part of that community or you don't understand it and you're a brand and you just go in and it feels like an inauthentic or opportunistic marketing channel and not a means of actually serving that community, it's not going to have the impact as if it's really organic and it's coming from people who really understand it and understands the needs of those people in that community.
There's also that aspect of being authentic and knowing at like a deep level who the players are and what they need and how to interact with them and how to build those relationships and that takes time, and you have to invest in that. And like you said, you have to have the right people on your team, but you also have to know the right people to go to. And then there's kind of seeding that idea, earning the trust, having this. You initially you had the socks, and then introducing additional products. But then there's like this jump from like, oh, this group that we know and have some way interacted with in person, love us and are very passionate about it, to like, okay, this thing is starting to take off. And now where does that go from here? What was that kind of phase like? How do you think about that? Like, oh, this is now beyond this, like, call it first ring of connections and circle and community, to like, oh, it's starting to pick up pace. Like, how do we transition into like building this beyond our quote unquote community or network that we know and have had and spent time with?
Yeah, I would say that the beauty of the run community, like I said earlier, is it is global, but it is very much interconnected. We did about 15 different pop-ups and activations last year at different marathons at different levels, world marathons, smaller, more regional races. Um, and you start to see a lot of the same people. It's a really big world, but it's also a really small world at the same time. And you just make connections by way of being in the community. And it's not necessarily like, all right, we partnered with this one club and we're on to the next thing. We very much have a long-term mindset with anything that we invest in or partner on. And so it's really figuring out a way. Obviously, we want to hit net new audiences, and we're a company, and we need to expand the audience that is seeing our brand and buying our products. And so there's a lot of continued support for, those brands that, or those clubs and those community folks who are continuing to do great things and pushing culture forward in the sport of running. But then, we really are just aware of the signals in the business. You see that you're starting to get some sales in Mexico City. Root cause why that's happening and how that's happening, and figure out where the connection is, or the second degree connection from our current base of community leaders that we know. That's a really good example where it was like a lot of people from Mexico are buying Bandit. What's going on there? We found one club that, like, somebody found it. We then did an interview with the leader of that club in our newsletter, our biweekly newsletter called the B-Mail, and that grew some more brand love down there. And we've since done some product collaborations with clubs down there, and we have more things on the roadmap in the future. And so we always leave some space for like those opportunistic, or I would just say more opportunistic connections and ways to expand the community. Sometimes you need to follow the signal and make sure that that level of kind of pliability in the roadmap that you put out in the beginning of the year, you allow for some forks in the road to double down on things that you didn't expect. And whenever that signal is out there, for us, it's all right. How do we figure out how we support that community or serve them in a way that aligns to really the rest of our playbook, and how we do things in the non-opportunistic things that we had planned 12 months in advance.
The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by our friends at EGYM. This is an exciting partnership for us, and not just because EGYM makes some of the most innovative fitness products out there, but because the entire EGYM team, led by their CEO, Philip, is committed to making health, fitness, and well-being more accessible for everyone. And that's a mission we can get behind. By combining their smart equipment with integrated software and hundreds of connected partner brands, EGYM helps fitness facilities stand out by delivering a personalized, gamified workout experience that improves outcomes and member engagement. So if you're a gym or health club operator thinking about how to best serve your members while driving business results, go see what EGYM is up to at egym.com. There was another on this idea of evolving running and running culture, the number of brands in the space that have taken different approaches to that. You had mentioned Tracksmith. Obviously, there's a long list of players that we could mention and what they do differently and how they think about product design and marketing and brand and community. How vast is that? Obviously, knowing how big the market for running is and how many people run and the participation and events and marathons and all those things. But even a step beyond that, like, how fragmented or segmented is it? And then how do you kind of carve that path to say, this is who Bandit is and going to continue to be from the brand and the ethos and like who that core customer is, to know again that this is who we partner with and this is what we build off of, but also this is how we're different. This is, we are not X company, or we're not taking the same approach as Y to differentiate in a crowded market.
Yeah. I think in running and in apparel in general, the barriers to entry are really low, but the barriers to scale are really high. And you see that in the competitive landscape in running. There are a ton of what I would call like more boutique brands, indie brands doing really, really cool, interesting things. And then there are a couple of brands that are like at the mid tier, almost none that are at like the $100 million plus business level. Um, Purely in running, there's plenty of activewear brands that have hit that, and then there's the big footwear brands. And really, what we've seen is that the Nikes, the On Runnings, the Asics, the Brooks, footwear is their bread and butter. It's where like 95% of their marketing budgets go towards. And we've always, that was kind of like when we were trying to figure out apparel is a much like it's much easier to figure out like where your hook is, your white space is if you're in the technology space, and figuring out your competitive advantage is much more concrete. But in apparel specifically, it comes down to taste and the brand that you're building and the aesthetic and all of these things that obviously like encompass the way that somebody emotionally feels about your brand. And so we've had a very specific view on who we are from the beginning and what we think Bandit stands for. That exercise of figuring out really like what are the brand pillars and how do we want people thinking about us didn't involve thinking about these other brands and where they stand. We always felt like if the brand had this unique DNA of how, the early employees felt about the running market, the fact that we're a New York City brand. New York City it's not necessarily the global hub of like elite running, but it is the global hub of run culture. It's also the global hub of, or one of the global hubs of fashion culture. And Oregon has a great brand. Boston's got a bunch of great brands. And we felt like one of the ways to really stand out or bring something different to the market was to imbue the spirit of New York City as we see it. People see New York City in different ways, and that's kind of the beauty of the city is like the diversity to it, the diverse perspectives within it. And so we put down on paper, like the first 3 months after we raised our seed round, was thinking about the mission, the vision, the values, and these core pillars. We don't necessarily have our blinders totally on as it relates to like what our competitors are doing, but we've found it to be much more effective to think about this unique DNA that we have as a brand and continuing to do things through that lens and not necessarily always worrying about, oh, is it different from that brand? How do we stand out from them? I think once you start doing that, you're building in relation to other things and you lose some sense of authenticity. And so it's very much been, okay, we spent a lot of time thinking about the DNA and what we want this brand to be. How does that scale out and how do we stay true to that? And if we stay true to that, we're really confident internally that, the outcome is this new, fresh and unique identity in the running market.
I think you nailed it. It's so much about vibe and kind of knowing it when you see it, and a feeling and an aesthetic, like all these things that aren't so tangible, right? It's not like you can put down on paper. I mean, I know you have in terms of vision and mission and all those things, but it's kind of this like you have to follow the vision that you've all have had, and you have to stick to it. And there's a certain level of discipline that comes with that, and there's a certain level of execution that also comes with that to realize it. And I think selfishly, that's part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation, because it is so much about bringing this thing to life, but also in doing it, it's difficult to say, like, especially, you mentioned raising a seed round and building the company, like going to investors and being like, kind of like, trust us. We know this feeling, we know this community, we know this opportunity. Translating kind of what you just talked about, which I totally subscribe to. And I think that's what draws someone like myself to the brand. Also on the business side, how do you articulate that to somebody that's looking at a P&L or looking at projections or looking at like, hey, this is what we're going to do with, capital that you're investing to go ahead and execute in a way that it could be one of those much larger brands, so to speak, or at least on the level of that in the future.
The seed round is definitely a totally different conversation than the Series A round. In the early days, it's almost fully, and I'm speaking from an investor standpoint only because I've had thousands of investor conversations throughout my career. It's a bet on people. It comes down to how they feel about you, how they feel about your track record, whether or not it's fair, how they feel about where you've worked previously, and then really how clearly you've articulated your vision. Like I was saying before, we're not thinking about how we differentiate from one brand or the other, but we were very articulately, or we were able to very articulately talk about how we thought we could find uh, or could take up space in the running market. And so, yes, it is a apparel brand. Yes, what you see now is, and a lot of people tell us that people have described Bandit as like a full sensory experience where it's like, yeah, you guys are in person at major marathon pop-ups and you got products and you have a podcast and all of these things. And that is like the totality of that is the vibe. But when it comes down to fundraising, it's how any, I think, brand raises money, which is like, this is where we are now and what we've done in the past. This is what we believe in terms of the total opportunity in the market and why there is opportunity, even though it is super competitive. And this is why we are the people to go after and capture that opportunity. And very tactically, this is how we're going to go out and do it. And these are the people that we're going to hire. We focused, really early on getting very great talent, super interested in joining us were we to raise around. And the first couple of years of a brand, it's all about that early team and whether or not they can execute on the vision. So we were really lucky to have our chief designer, Ardith Singh. She was the head designer, founding designer at the women's activewear brand Bandier. She's like, for me, the Michael Jordan of activewear, just an incredible designer. And that was just another proof point when we're going out to people. Is like, we have somebody, my brother and I've run businesses, I've run marketing. He's created some of the best award-winning digital experiences from an e-com perspective. And Ardith brings this incredible skill set when it comes to designing activewear. And that's a really potent combo in the early days of an apparel business. So it's the dream and the people really early on. And then obviously it comes down to in the Series A, like, what are the proof points that you have, and are those proof points scalable to get you to the next level?
We kind of talked about how we got to this point and all the various aspects of brand and community and product and team. And now maybe looking forward, as you think about, you mentioned at the onset, like, you and your brother had a much bigger vision for what this could become, and thinking about how you continue to evolve running and kind of going beyond that initial community and how you build those relationships. What does that roadmap or vision look like going forward, both kind of like, call it in the next 6 months, but also maybe 6+ years, as you think about like, this is the company we want to build. And at the end of the day, when we maybe look back on it, or as we continue to build that empire, like, this is what Bandit evolves into.
Yeah, I think like the vision, everybody's unique vision definitely comes from like their inspirations and their past experiences. I talked about us really loving like the skate and surf brands that came up organically and ultimately did something really impactful in that market or in that niche. On the other side, and my brother, I've always admired the really timeless, iconic brands. Leica and Porsche are the ones that always come to mind when I'm thinking about like the North Star for something that's like, for a brand that's incredibly enduring, that has an incredibly passionate base. That's ultimately what we're looking to build, is a brand that people are super emotionally connected to, is timeless, and is admired. And so the next 6 months is definitely different relative to how I think about the next 5 to 10 years, because We're about 16 months out from the launch of our first head to toe line. And so at the end of the year 2023, that was our first full year. It was really like, we're happy that we had more wins than losses and that we learned from the losses. In the first 6 months of this year, it's really, um, hopefully improving on the things that were going well, and editing and refining the things that didn't go well, and continuing to get the metrics that we know really matter going in a continued improving direction. So we're still in that place where we're going from where we were in 2023, which was really great. We're still a very small brand relative to the entire market. 2024, it's definitely a different scale in terms of what our plans are, and going from 23 to 24, we'll have learned a lot more about, like, did those things that we thought would scale, which then hopefully at the end of this year puts us in a place where we feel a lot more comfortable going to that next level. But it all really comes down to, again, we have a really long-term view on the brand. We want to create something timeless. We want to do it in a way where we're creating emotional connections by serving the community. And I think this everybody here internally, like, really is motivated by doing positive by the sport of running. And that's like really the secret sauce, is people who are really good at their jobs and people who are really motivated to help us achieve the mission and vision.
You mentioned earlier about this, the almost boutique brands in the scene, and then obviously the kind of behemoths on the other end of the spectrum, and footwear being a significant portion of the, upper end. And this is true across all industries really, that there's like this messy middle where it's like, who's their core customer? What's the price points? What is the product? Who is it really for? What does it mean? And ultimately, like, you have this like barbell, right, at the two extremes. Getting to that place while maintaining this kind of iconic and timeless brand. Obviously, I know it's still early in the process, but do you envision ultimately where it is footwear is that same driver? You figure out a different path to having this revenue mix that gets you to that place. How do you see kind of the offering evolving product wise relative to the brand?
Internally, we've always thought running is the constant for every other sport. You can't really say that about any other sport as it relates to running, right? So you see a brand like Lululemon that started with yoga. They were deeply entrenched in the local yoga studio scene. That's really how they built brand equity, was within that niche. And long term, they've broken into the greater concentric circles of sportswear and athleisure. And we've very deliberately, from a product offering perspective, we wanted to show early on that that's who we want to be, or that the range that we want to have as a brand. So we actually do a good bulk of our business in lifestyle gear and product offerings that runners are wearing off the track as often as they are on the track. We've also done interesting things in terms of telegraphing our desire to have that range long term. Like, our last year, we did a soccer inspired capsule collection, because that sport is near and dear to my brother's hearts. And we really respect brands that have that range. You think about like Palace Skateboards, or which they're sponsored a Tour de France team, Supreme, which has been on athletes and celebrities, but somehow they've stayed true to the skateboarding community. And that's really what we think about at the DNA of this brand, is the soul is with the goal driven runner. But there's a lot of people who running is a part of their identity, and it's not their entire identity. And we always talk about creating cross-cultural bridges in and out of the sport of running. And we want to create those bridges in really interesting ways that still allow us to tell the story about how running is a part of somebody's life, but also art and design and architecture and music. And so I think it's really in a strategic, sequential way, thinking about early on, you really need to be something powerful for a small group of people, and then brought in really kind of that funnel, and it needs to be done in a very like paced and again sequential way, so it doesn't feel like we're partnering with McDonald's and that makes no sense because you guys are a year and a half out of the gate, and what does that mean? um, and getting into those new audiences, and ultimately having a cross cultural impact, requires the team to think about when should we be doing things that get us into those new audiences and how we should be doing them and who we should be doing them with. There have been a lot of opportunities that we could have gone after early on, but I think it's really key to have that long-term focus in terms of like who you'd ultimately like to be for the addressable market that you're in, but also focusing on the now as to how you can get there in a sustainable way. So it makes sense from a brand story perspective, and you're staying true to the DNA. So DNA of the brand, so you're not isolating that core audience before you've really built enough trust with them, and that's a years long process.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I appreciate you breaking it down. I think this idea of building bridges and concentric circles makes a lot of sense as you get to this like cross culture and what running is at the heart of, and then how you kind of build on that product, community, brand, et cetera, to really make this over, kind of the lifetime of the company. Maybe a couple more questions before we get you out of here. One being, you mentioned that transition from 2023 to 2024 and potentially a lot on the roadmap and continuing to expand. What should we look out for? Is there anything you're particularly excited about or want to plug before we get you out of here?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm excited about. We just launched, so last fall, we kicked off a strategic partnership with ASICS. As a part of that, we launched an in-person in New York City and a virtual marathon training program. Had a lot of learnings with the first iteration of it this past fall, which ultimately led into Berlin and the New York City Marathon. We just launched the spring version. And alongside that refresh of the marathon training program, we just launched the program app, which is a course specific generative training log. Basically, it's we fed OpenAI with a lot of internal marathon and training knowledge. So you can choose Boston Marathon. The program is very specific, more hill work than your average marathon. We just added London this week. There's a coach GPT on there, which can answer questions that you might have throughout your training process. And so I'm really excited about that evolution of the marathon training program. And it's just a really nice connective tissue as we show up at the Boston Marathon for our pop-up, or the Chicago Marathon later this year, or New York City Marathon. And so I'm really psyched about that. We've got more really cool projects in the works in collaboration with ASICS. I would say I'm just most excited about the evolution of our actual performance product. We've had so many learnings, and our apparel design team has really fused their unique take on how they think they can bring something refreshing to the market with our community-centered design process, which is literally like bringing in people from the New York City running community and having them prototype new products and getting feedback, combining those two things, in addition to all of the other feedback loops that we get or got in 2023. So our spring line launches later in February. I think it's our best collection yet, so I'm psyched about that. And then just psyched to do more things with the community on the ground throughout the year.
Yeah, man, a lot to look forward to. I'm sure you're wildly busy, so we appreciate you making some time to chat with us today. Website, social, what's the best place to follow along, learn more? Obviously, all this stuff that's you're dropping now, training plans and new gear and everything else. Where should people head?
Yeah, banditrunning.com is the website, at Bandit Running on Instagram. We're doing a lot of YouTube content this year, so check out our channel. We just dropped a new series called Dialed, where We are chronicling the final weeks going into the Olympic marathon trials. 9 of our Bandit sponsored athletes qualified for the Olympic marathon trials on February 3rd in Orlando. So you can watch that new series now. Yeah, that's where we are.
Cool. We will get everything linked up and hope people head there and check it out. And thanks again for making time today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.